cup of coffee, sit back and listen to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life features stories to inspire and motivate you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Visit cyacyl.com.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Change in life is inevitable, but for some people, change may seem like the end of the world. Sometimes change brings a loss of love or companionship, sometimes the loss of financial security. Other times it may cause the loss of one's identity or self-worth. The thought of moving forward in a new circumstance may be paralyzing. When this occurs, how do you find the strength to continue moving forward when your entire world is rocked? Today's guest, Nancy Levin, shares how she survived the ending of her 18-year marriage with the courage to invite and welcome the change instead of fearing and hiding from it. She now guides people on how to deal with change in their own divorce journey in order to heal and to grow. Nancy is the author of Writing for My Life, Reclaiming the Lost Pieces of Me. She's the event director at Hay House and will be one of the featured speakers at the New York Hay House I Can Do It Ignite conference held November 3rd and 4th at the Javits Center. Welcome, Nancy. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Joan. I'm happy to be here.
Nancy, your life story, what you've gone through, what you've experienced feeling-wise as a result of a divorce, it's unfortunately a very common tale. It's something that I've actually experienced on a personal level as well. So how was it that you were able to invite those changes that took place when I know you experienced a similar type of feelings of loss of self-esteem and self-worth?
Yes, and as you mentioned, it's very interesting, and one of those no coincidences that I am the event director at Hay House, and for over 10 years have been producing events with our best-selling authors, and have been in the presence of Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer, et cetera. And it was interesting because it wasn't really until I was in a position to really need to dig deep down that the teachings that had been sort of in me by osmosis really took a hold of me. And it wasn't until I was really willing to ask for help from the people who I had been serving for so long that I was able to move through to the other side of understanding that we have to go through our greatest fear in order to experience life's opportunities.
Nancy, let's back up for a moment and let's talk a little bit about what your life was like before that. For me, I was a stay-at-home, work-from-home mom. I was married 23 years. I raised 2 children. At the end of that journey, I had lost complete sense of who I was and self-worth. And this, what I'm doing now, is the result of that experience. So if you would share a little bit about your path.
Sure. So, it was as if on the day my husband and I met, it was as if he introduced himself to me as, "Hi, I am broken." And I introduced myself to him as, "Great, I'm Superwoman. I will fix you." And I was the type of person who never wanted anyone to see me sweat. I was a perfectionist. I was projecting an image of perfection to the world. And all along, the marriage was crumbling. I was crumbling. And it was so much more important that people thought I was happy than that I actually be happy. And it was so much more important to me to fulfill everyone else's needs before mine. So the fact of the matter is, somewhere along the way, I lost all sense of myself.
Nancy, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, are we twins? The similarities are uncanny, to be honest with you.
I think as I've been out speaking more, at first it's funny. At first I thought, I'm not going to go out and speak about divorce. It's this tiny niche market.
Yeah.
And it's not. And it also permeates any sort of ending of a relationship or any moving through a choice point of some sort of crisis or an ending or a grief. I really believe that, grief is grief and loss is loss. And it's just the way that it comes in and out of our lives. And I know for me, I really had to get to a place where it was no longer about saving my marriage and no longer about fixing my husband. It was truly just about healing my own life.
It's interesting because you had just said you thought of it this little niche market. And I recently had Dr. Terry Orbach on the show, and we spoke about the fact that 50% of people before the age of couples before the age of 50 will find themselves single again, either through death or divorce. So we're talking about 50% of couples. So that's hardly a niche market.
I have learned this. I really have. It's been fascinating. It's also been fascinating to hear, as I share my story and to hear other people's stories, and there always is this sort of through line, and I think there is, no matter what the circumstances are, I do think it does come down, especially for women, losing themselves in the marriage.
Now, Nancy, you are, by anyone's standards, an extremely accomplished woman. And were you always a career woman during the marriage?
I was always a career woman. I was actually the breadwinner in the marriage, and it's who I am. It's always been what I've loved and what I've wanted to do, and I realized early on that that was going to be my path. But then you fall in love and you get married, and I thought I could sort of bring my husband along with me on the journey I was on, but he wasn't really interested in expanding this way.
Usually people tend to think that this happens to those stay-at-home type of women, the stay-at-home moms. And so it can happen to anyone. And that's something that I really want our listeners to pay attention to. No one is immune to having this type of situation occur.
That's very true. And, a big thing I really had to work through was, I'm a powerhouse. I'm a powerhouse at work. I'm on stage. I can manage a million details. I've got a million balls in the air that I'm juggling, and yet at home I had no voice. And this was something very difficult to reconcile after the fact, when I started really recognizing that at home I really couldn't stand up for myself. I was in a position where I was not able to speak my mind freely for fear of being criticized, and I wasn't able to offer my opinions. It was just the dynamic that had been set up between me and my then husband, and really trying to understand how come at work I could do certain things and at home I couldn't. And what I have found is that there are a lot of very strong, powerful women who are out in the world who at home are being controlled.
Why do you think that happens?
I know for myself it may have started in a certain sense of because I'm so at work, because when I'm at work I'm always in control and having to make all the decisions and having to be in charge of all the details, there is some sense of relief in wanting someone else to sort of make a few decisions here and there. But I think that there becomes a dynamic with women like me and a man who doesn't exactly know how to handle someone this big. And so I think a power struggle starts to ensue, and I think that an unforeseen element of control starts being this insidious underlying thread in the marriage. And I think, I can only really speak for how it was with me. And, I was with a man who was ultimately very controlling. I, at some point, allowed myself to be controlled.
Nancy, what happened to you post-divorce? What type of feelings did you experience?
The major thing for me has been the rebuilding of self-esteem and self-worth and value, and really coming to a place of knowing that my value and my self-worth is really directly related to just who I am, not what I do and not what I do for anyone else. And also, the journey through divorce has also ultimately been a journey to find my own voice and to be able to stand up for myself and to speak freely about whatever I want in the way that I want to.
So, Nancy, for someone who's going through what you're describing and wants to find his or her own voice and wants to reclaim self-worth, what was it that you did? What advice would you offer to that person?
I have to say that the first step was really to tell the truth to someone safe. I was really afraid of anyone seeing me, seeing what was going on. But I had a very close friend who I finally exposed the truth to, and becoming vulnerable to one person made it much easier to become vulnerable to others. And I also turned over in some way to her, to my friend. I gave her the ability to hold me when I couldn't hold myself, and let her hold for me her vision of what my future could be, because I couldn't see it yet. And so it's almost like, a Jell-O mold or something.
Mm-hmm.
I was all wiggly and wobbly, and I just needed something around me to stabilize me until I could get solid. So I think that we all think everyone else is so busy. We all think that no one understands us. We all think that no one has time for us. We all think, we don't want anyone to really see the truth. But really, the first step has to be willing to let someone close and someone trustworthy in so that you can begin to share the experience so you're not keeping it under lock and key and behind closed doors.
And that's very important, and that's important for friends to really understand that.
Mm-hmm.
A divorce is a death, and prior to the divorce, that's the illness. If someone, God forbid, had an ill parent, the pre-divorce is the illness, and the divorce is the actual death, and that is the time that friends are really needed more than ever. I know sometimes people have this attitude, well, it's over now, and they don't think that they're needed. That's really when they're needed to go through the mourning process and the rebuilding process.
It's so true. Everything you're saying is so true. And I remember that there were a few people who just reached out to me and just would send an email or make a phone call and say, I don't even know what to say, but I just want to tell you I'm thinking about you and I'm here. And, it is like you just want to know that there are people that are holding you from afar even if they're not right with you. And I was very fortunate to have very, very close people, and my family was amazing, and people were really willing to go through the journey of the grief with me.
So, Nancy, after letting people in and depending on them and having them be your support system, what is the next thing that you did in the rebuilding process?
It sounds kind of funny, but I really had to relook at, what do I want to do? What do I actually enjoy doing? What really is my life? I realized that I did so much in my life because it was what my ex-husband wanted to do. And, do I even like to ski? Do I even like to eat this certain food, whatever it is? I started really having to go through an assessment process of who am I and what do I really want to do with this time. And I started looking sort of at each day of waking up, what do I want to do today? Obviously I have to work. Obviously there are things that have to get done and responsibilities. But beyond those responsibilities, what can I do for myself that would be fun? Fun was something that I thought was for other people for a long time. I thought I was very busy facilitating everyone else's fun, but I was very stoic and I didn't need fun. And now it's like I just want to have fun.
Well, and that's the thing. If we're able to change those negative feelings into something of looking at it like a rebirth, a second part of your life, you can actually start to fill your days with excitement and have fun.
It's true, and there are days that I'm like, oh my God, I'm 47, I can't believe this, and then I look at, Louise Hay, who's turning 86 in 2 weeks, and I'm like, you know what, I have all the time in the world.
When Dr. Christian Northrup was on the show, we spoke about, that feeling that we were supposed to do till death do us part. When you get into your 40s, in the old days when those vows were created, in your 40s, people were dying then. So we really did make the till death do us part. Now it's time for us.
Yeah, and it's, there was a whole element, 18 years is 18 years. It was a significant part of my life. And I certainly went through a period of, is not wanting to get divorced at all and not wanting to have a failed marriage, and looking at things like that, and then realizing, as I said a little earlier, ultimately I can only heal myself, and I have to be willing to stand up for my own life that way.
Nancy, we need to take a break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life now has a free monthly digital magazine that can be read online or emailed to your inbox. Each month, nationally recognized leaders in their field provide the information that you need to inspire and motivate you. We believe in a holistic approach to life, incorporating mind, body, and spirit. As philosopher Francis Bacon said, knowledge is power. Use the wisdom provided in the publication and apply it to your everyday life. Visit cyacyl.com for more information or to begin your free subscription. That's cyacyl.com. Welcome back to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman, and our guest today is Nancy Levin, author of the book, Writing for My Life, Reclaiming the Lost Pieces of Me. Nancy, before break, we were talking about some of the steps that you advise people to take when they're in that rebuilding process. How were you able to overcome those feelings of loss and switch them into positives? As I mentioned in the introduction, sometimes there's a feelings of loss of self-worth, loss of financial security, loss of companionship. How did you take those negatives and make the shift to a positive attitude?
A couple things come to mind. One is I found myself, for the first how many ever months, I really was pushing I was really numb. I mean, that's the truth. I was numb. And I was really trying to push away any sort of memories or push away anything that was sort of coming at me. And then I remember very distinctly, I had an experience where a memory was coming in, a memory of my past, a memory of life with my ex-husband was coming in. And instead of pushing it away, I decided to invite it. And I decided to sort of work with the memory. And I started noticing that the more I could let them come into me, they would start dissolving. It was by pushing the things away that I didn't want to penetrate or that I didn't think I was ready to look at, that they were staying. They were staying there, sort of knocking at the door. So I think the first thing is to just be able to acknowledge that, yes, there's going to be sadness or there's going to be memories and there's going to be feelings of an unlived life or feelings of missing the life that you used to live. But to let it in so it can start dissolving instead of staying there and knocking at the door.
I think what's important is to remember, as I said before, it is a mourning process. You have to feel it. Don't repress it. Like you're saying, work with it and then let it go.
Yes, and I also think, to be, and this was difficult for me, but to really learn about time and about being gentle with myself, because I'm such a, get it done kind of girl that I'm like, okay, I'm going to mourn and grieve and I'm going to get over this divorce now,
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is it takes time, and you know what? It takes as long as it takes, and for me it may take a certain amount of time, and for you it takes a different amount of time, and someone else it takes another amount of time, and no one can be in charge of that, and least of all us. And so I really had to get to a point of grace and forgiveness and gentleness with myself when things weren't moving as fast as I wanted, or things didn't seem to be healing as fast as I wanted. And all the while all this was going on, I mean, this whole other miraculous experience was happening for me, which was as I really started becoming more vulnerable and letting more people in, and ultimately letting people love me, letting people really know me and love me, doors have been opening to opportunities that are beyond my wildest, not even expectation, just beyond my wildest dreams. And I'm able to say yes to things that I never thought would even be in front of me.
And what's amazing? You mentioned before that there are no coincidences. And I think that you've been given a wonderful platform to take your life experience and go out and help so many people.
Thank you. It feels like that. It feels like everything has come together in a certain way in a divine plan, that I would be traveling the world with the authors with whom I work and helping them to illuminate their message and put it out into the world. And now I'm sort of being given the same opportunity. It's marvelous. It's magical.
Nancy, tell us about your new book, Writing for My Life, Reclaiming the Lost Pieces of Me. What are you trying to accomplish with this book?
I have a master's in poetry, and the irony is that I've written since I was 11 years old, and I've over 80 volumes of a personal journal, and I've been writing poetry, but I never really thought about publishing until I was moving through this divorce. And what I started finding was that as I was reading poems before our keynote speakers at our I Can Do It conferences, people would come up and find that they wanted to share with me how whatever I had said had resonated. And I started realizing that even though the poems were very personal to me about my experience, there is something true about the more specific. It can also be the more general, that more people can relate if you're really specific. And so I decided to put together the collection of poetry. It's divided in 3 sections, and it sort of takes the reader through the journey of me leaving the marriage and ultimately finding my own voice.
Nancy, where can our listeners go to get more information about you and your work?
My website is my name, nancylevin.com.
So that's nancylevin.com. Or as always, our listeners can visit our website, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on our site, listen to past shows as podcasts, read the digital magazine, sign up for our mailing list, take part in our book club, and be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Nancy, again, I'm so happy that you were here today. As I said in the beginning, I feel like you are a kindred spirit My path has been very similar to what you've experienced, and I'm just so happy that you're out there being open and touching so many lives, and for being here and sharing it with us.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
This is Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.